It's my first look at the quarterback position for week 8, and we're starting right now. What's up, guys? Welcome to another first look. Do me a favor and smash the like button before you forget. And if this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DFS player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel, but don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. I will say that the first thing that I'm almost always looking at is the Vegas lines each and every week. But before we get to that, I kind of want to talk a little bit about this sheet that is available to all my Twitch subscribers. So it's something that I put together every week. It definitely starts out a little bit more basic, and then throughout the week I'm adding things that come through, whether it's pressure rate, whether it's pace of play, that sort of thing. Bunch of stuff that doesn't come out on a Tuesday, but I know you guys want to get started on your lineup, so that's why we started doing these first look videos. So rushing yards, extremely important. We did do a first take before this one. I was diving kind of deeper into that before we had an internet issue. So I'll keep a little bit more brief about Josh Allen, but I do think he's very squarely back in play this week, especially at home against this Philly team. I will say that this Philly team hasn't been as bad on defense as I originally thought. I guess they're getting a little bit healthier, but through the air isn't really why we're kind of rostering Josh Allen anyway. It's the floor and the ceiling that he gives us on the ground. So I do have him projected for the most rushing yards on the slate. No Lamar Jackson on the main slate this week. Pretty middling total for Buffalo and Arizona. Arizona, much tougher spot for Kyler Murray against this New Orleans Saints team. On the road, I get it. It's in the Superdome, all of that, but New Orleans has been a pretty slow-paced team this year. I don't know if I guess Arizona is almost always projected to have some of the most plays on the slate. They throw a ton as well. So we could see that maybe slow down a little bit. But one thing that I would say is Arizona's actually been running a lot more over the last 3 weeks than they have to start the season. So they're only at a 47% pass rate over the last 3 games. So that's something to think about with Kyler Murray. He's also someone that's just not throwing deep a ton as well. 7.2 average intended air yards and 6.8 yards per attempt. Pretty low for a guy like Kyler Murray. I will say that I do enjoy the rushing equity you get with him, but not someone that has been throwing deep a ton, which is not ideal for fantasy. So let's take a look at some guys that are throwing deep. Jameis Winston, Matthew Stafford. So Matthew Stafford's an interesting one, especially against this Giants team. I typically don't roster these guys that don't offer any rushing floor whatsoever, as you guys know. But this is a pretty great spot. This Giants team, 27th in both short and deeper defense against the pass. So that's an interesting spot at home for a Stafford quarterback. I mean, he's been playing some of the best kind of quarterback play of his entire career right now. He's been playing extremely well. They're putting up points. The pace should be, a little bit worse than some of these other spots that we'll look at. But I do think that Stafford at 6,100 seems almost like kind of like the Goff play last week. Just there's going to be a ton of pass attempts and nice team total there. We know that team total is super important at quarterback. So that's an interesting spot for sure. The guy that I'm looking at, though, and I could imagine a lot of you guys probably feel the same way, Russell Wilson. 9.9 average intended air yards, 8.5 yards per attempt this season. That's really solid, but this matchup against Atlanta is one that I'm not willing to ignore, I don't think. So they are one of the worst teams in the league at defending the deep passes. We know that Russ has been airing it out. He's obviously one of the more efficient quarterbacks week in and week out. You're going to have to pay for it, though. He's 7,200. So on DraftKings in particular, it's definitely going to be one of those spots where we're going to have some value open up. I think that was one of my biggest problems with week 7 was that there wasn't a lot of value that I was in love with. So we do have Christian McCaffrey back. We'll get to that in the running back section, but there's a lot to pay up for as well. Someone in the chat was asking if there's any concern that the game gets out of hand in Seattle and Atlanta. Yeah, that's always the concern with Seattle, is that when they do get ahead, as you can see here, like I was saying about Kyler Murray over the last 3 games, that's a little bit new. But for Seattle, this team wants to run. So 48.8% of their offensive plays have been runs, so or have been passes. So that's extremely low against this Atlanta team. Yeah, if they end up getting ahead and Russ doesn't get his, it's always a concern. It's always my concern with Russ and this team, because they're one of those teams that's definitely not going to throw unless it's a neutral situation. If they're trailing or kind of right there with game script, kind of at 6.5. I don't know. That's a concern. It's not a huge spread, and I know they're on the road, but yeah, that's an interesting one. I think that, Deshaun Watson right there, very similar spot, to be completely honest, against this Oakland team that Aaron Rodgers, he shredded. Another great spot to go back to Deshaun Watson, in my opinion. 28th in Defense against deep passes, we know that Deshaun Watson not scared to throw deep. Oakland's not a team that's really going to get much pressure on the quarterback, so I wouldn't really imagine Watson's going to have a tough time back there for having enough time to get his players to kind of get downfield. That's one of the things that we were concerned about with Will Fuller early in the season, was just is there enough time for those deeper routes to develop? So Watson, I think, squarely back in play at 7,100. Those are the guys that I always kind of want to touch on first because they're going to have a lot more rushing equity. I'm not as interested in someone like Daniel Jones. It's just a really tough spot against this Detroit team who has done pretty good job keeping things in front of them and limiting opponents to not many offensive plays. So Daniel Jones, I get it. At least you're going to get a little bit of a floor on the ground, but just not throwing deep frequently at all. Saquon is back. I would expect them to kind of lean a little bit more on him this coming week. So someone in the chat's asking about Ryan Tannehill versus Tampa Bay. So yeah, let's take a look at Tannehill. He's 5,100. You mentioned Tampa Bay. They are at home. Tight spread. I like that. Yeah, it looks like a team that is not scared to kind of, or not defending the deep pass very well, which is great for Tannehill, who actually, obviously a much smaller sample here, but he's been throwing deep a decent amount as well. So I don't mind that as far as guys to pay down for. He seems like one of the better options. Someone was mentioning Jacoby Brissett before we kind of lost connection there. 5,600 for him. I think at that point, yeah, I would probably just prefer to go down to Tannehill, as scary as that is. Pretty similar spot. I think I would just prefer attacking Tampa Bay than attacking Denver on kind of a team like Indy, who has shown kind of a lot of volatility in the way they've been attacking other teams as well. So that's kind of where I'm at with the guys that are going to be rushing. So I mentioned Stafford on kind of the other end of the spectrum as guys that are going to throw deep but not give us that rushing floor. But Tannehill, yeah, that's nice that he's at least been willing to chuck it a little bit to start the year. On the other side of that game, so Jameis Winston at Tampa Bay, that's an interesting one too. I struggle with Jameis a little bit just at times because it's hard to peg exactly what he's going to do, right? He's got such a large range of outcomes, I feel like, for a quarterback. Like, he can have these big blow-up games where he turns the ball over a ton, and then the other team just kind of takes the air out of the ball. I think that would be one of the bigger concerns against Tennessee, who definitely would like to slow things down if they can. I think that's a bigger concern with kind of this entire game as a whole. But that's an interesting one. So one thing that I did mention before, teams that are throwing a lot over the last 3 games, the Chargers have been throwing a ton as well. Don't have a ton of interest in Phillip Rivers at Chicago. Not really on Andy Dalton against the Rams either. Pretty low team totals to go after there. But it is interesting, a couple of these teams that have been throwing a ton. Atlanta, Tampa Bay, all of these teams not scared to lean on their quarterback through the air. So I like that quite a bit. What do you guys think about Sam Darnold against Jacksonville? Obviously, not an amazing spot by any means, but I think with everyone kind of jumping off of that, Sam Darnold's at least intriguing in kind of a large field tournament. Not really my typical type of play for sure. Just kind of looking at the Vegas lines in general, this LA versus Cincinnati spot, I would imagine a lot of people are going to be going back to Jared Goff. It's a pretty amazing spot, 6,800. At that point, I would prefer Russ. I would probably prefer Deshaun Watson at that range, just because he's going to give me a little bit more of a floor. Is someone that's been throwing deep. Goff, until last week, they really haven't kind of let him air it out a ton. But that's a great team total there. It is a pretty big spread as well. Cincinnati just hasn't been very good this year at all. 28th against short throws, 30th against deep throws. Great spot to go back to the Rams this week, I think. So always going to carry the same kind of risk there. It's like the Matt Ryan play. If he doesn't get there through the year, get you multiple touchdowns, it's really going to be tough, especially at that price tag, 6,800 for sure. Someone asking about McCaffrey in the chat. Yeah, we'll get to running back here soon. Want to kind of wrap up the quarterback section of the first look here. But yeah, I think that this is pretty standard week. It seems like I think a lot of people probably going to go back to Goff, but I think that if you wanted to kind of attack the cheaper end of the spectrum, I think Tannehill is interesting. Someone in the chat mentioned that. I think that was a sharp call for sure. Not scared to go back to Josh Allen or Russell Wilson. I think that that's kind of where I'm at the quarterback position. If you want to learn more about how to become a profitable daily fantasy sports player and better, start now by hitting the subscribe icon in the bottom right hand corner so you don't miss anything. Be on the lookout for all of my DFS content throughout the week as we dive even deeper into week 8. And be sure and join the contest that I have running on LinkedIn. If you want a little bit more information on that, check out my Twitter at Joe Holka. But I will be giving a free entry into the week 9 $100 SPY on DraftKings. So make sure you take advantage of that. I'll see you guys next time.